Hurry, hide the grain!
You there! What are you hiding?
Please, it's just food for our children!
Seize it all!
Before Samson was born, the land of Israel groaned under the harsh rule of the Philistines. Villages that once rang with songs of harvest now echoed with fear. Farmers hid their grain in caves. Fathers sharpened broken tools because metal was scarce. Mothers whispered prayers at night, asking God to remember his people once again. In the hill country of Dan lived a man named Manoah and his wife, a faithful woman who carried a sorrow that few understood. She had no child, and in those days barrenness felt like a heavy shadow over the heart. One evening, while she worked quietly in the field, a radiant messenger of the Lord appeared before her. His presence was brighter than the setting sun, yet peaceful like cool water in the desert. He told her that although she had been barren, she would give birth to a son. The child would be dedicated to God from birth, never cutting his hair, never drinking strong wine, and never touching anything unclean. He would be a Nazirite set apart for a divine purpose. More importantly, the messenger declared that the boy would begin to deliver Israel from the Philistines. The woman ran home with trembling excitement and told Manoah everything. Together they prayed that the messenger would return and teach them how to raise the promised child. God heard their prayer. The angel appeared again, repeating the holy instructions. Manoah prepared an offering, and as the flames rose toward heaven, the messenger ascended within the fire itself. Husband and wife fell to the ground in awe. They knew that God had visited them. In time the child was born, and they named him Samson. Even as a boy he seemed different from others. Strength rested upon him in unusual ways. When he carried water jars, he lifted two at once while older boys struggled with one. When he worked in the fields his hands moved like iron. Yet his greatest gift was not merely physical power. The Spirit of God stirred within him. Heaven had chosen him before his first breath. As Samson grew into manhood, stories of Philistine cruelty surrounded him constantly. Soldiers mocked Israelites openly in the markets. Tax collectors took grain from poor families. Young men who resisted were beaten publicly. Samson burned with anger whenever he witnessed injustice. Deep within him lived a calling he did not fully understand, a restless fire that would not remain silent. One day Samson traveled to Timnah, a Philistine town. There he saw a young Philistine woman and desired to marry her. His parents objected, reminding him that their people were set apart from the nations around them. Yet God was already working through events that seemed ordinary. Samson insisted, and reluctantly his parents accompanied him to arrange the marriage. As they journeyed through vineyards near Timnah, a fierce lion suddenly leaped from the bushes, roaring with deadly hunger. Samson carried no spear or sword, yet the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him with overwhelming power. He seized the lion with his bare hands and tore it apart as easily as a shepherd tears apart a young goat for sacrifice. He told no one what had happened. Quietly he continued walking, knowing that God had shown him a glimpse of the strength hidden within him. Later, when Samson returned for the wedding feast, he noticed bees swarming inside the lion's carcass. Honey had formed there, golden and sweet. He ate some and shared it with his parents without revealing where it came from. During the feast Samson proposed a riddle to the Philistine guests. Out of the eater came something to eat, and out of the strong came something sweet. The men could not solve it. Frustrated, they threatened Samson's bride until fear overcame her loyalty. She begged Samson repeatedly for the answer until he finally revealed it. The Philistines solved the riddle and mocked him openly. Samson's anger exploded like thunder. Empowered again by the Spirit of God, he struck down 30 Philistine men in Ashkelon and took their garments to pay the wager. Then he returned home, wounded by betrayal and consumed with fury. His bride was later given to another man. When Samson learned this, he devised a strange act of judgment. He captured 300 foxes, tied torches between their tails, and released them into Philistine grain fields. Flames raced across harvests, vineyards, and olive groves. Smoke darkened the sky while terrified farmers watched their wealth vanish in fire. The Philistines demanded to know who had caused such destruction. When they discovered Samson's connection to the woman from Timnah, they killed her and her father in revenge. Violence answered violence, and sorrow spread through the land. Samson retaliated fiercely, striking many Philistines before hiding in the cave of Etam. Fearful Israelites soon arrived and begged him to surrender. They were terrified that the Philistines would punish the nation because of him. Samson agreed to let them bind him with ropes, but he made them promise not to kill him themselves. As they delivered him to the Philistines at Lehi, enemy soldiers shouted triumphantly. Yet the Spirit of the Lord came upon Samson once more. The ropes around his arms snapped like burnt thread. Looking around for a weapon, he found only the fresh jawbone of a donkey. With unstoppable strength he charged into the crowd and struck down 1,000 men. Dust rose beneath his feet as enemies fled in terror. When the battle ended, Samson stood alone among the fallen, breathing heavily beneath the blazing sun. Exhausted and thirsty, Samson cried out to God. Despite his strength, he knew he could not survive by power alone. God answered him mercifully, causing water to spring from the ground. Samson drank deeply, and his strength returned. In that lonely moment he learned an important truth. The mighty warrior still depended entirely upon divine grace. For 20 years Samson judged Israel. Many people admired his courage, yet his life remained troubled by weakness and temptation. Though chosen by God, he was still human. His heart often wandered toward dangerous desires. The same man who could defeat armies struggled to guard his own spirit. Eventually Samson met a woman named Delilah in the valley of Sorek. Philistine rulers approached her secretly and offered great wealth if she discovered the secret of Samson's strength. Delilah agreed and began questioning him persistently. "Tell me," she asked sweetly, "what makes you so strong, and how could someone overpower you?" At first Samson answered playfully, hiding the truth behind lies. He told her he could be bound with fresh bowstrings. While he slept, Delilah tied him up and cried, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." Samson snapped the cords instantly. Another time he claimed new ropes could restrain him, but again he broke free with ease. Then he said his strength would disappear if his hair were woven tightly into a loom. Even that failed. Yet Delilah continued pressing him day after day. Her words wore against his soul like water against stone. Finally Samson revealed the truth he had guarded since birth. "No razor has ever touched my head," he confessed. "I have been dedicated to God from my mother's womb. If my hair is shaved, my strength will leave me." That night Delilah lulled Samson to sleep upon her lap. Quietly she summoned a man who cut away the 7 locks of his hair. As the final strands fell, the sacred sign of his dedication vanished. Delilah cried out once more, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." Samson awoke expecting to overpower his enemies again. But this time the Lord's power had departed from him. Philistine soldiers seized him easily. They gouged out his eyes, bound him with bronze chains and dragged him to Gaza. There the once mighty warrior was forced to grind grain like a slave in prison. Darkness surrounded Samson completely. He could no longer see sunlight over the hills of Israel. He could no longer watch birds sweep across the sky. The man whose strength once terrified armies now stumbled through humiliation and pain. Yet prison became the place where Samson truly began to understand grace. As months passed, his hair slowly began to grow again. More importantly, his heart turned back toward God. Brokenness humbled him. The pride that once blinded him faded in suffering. Though he had failed many times, God had not abandoned his purpose. One day the Philistine rulers gathered in a massive temple to celebrate before their false god Dagon. Thousands crowded inside while music echoed through the hall. They praised Dagon for delivering Samson into their hands. In the middle of their celebration they demanded that Samson be brought out to entertain them. Blind and chained, Samson was led into the temple by a servant boy. Laughter filled the building as people mocked the fallen hero. Yet Samson's spirit was no longer driven by pride or revenge alone. Quietly he asked the servant to place his hands upon the central pillars supporting the temple roof. Standing between the pillars, Samson prayed from the depths of his soul. "Sovereign Lord, remember me. Please strengthen me just once more, so that I may fulfill my purpose." It was not merely a cry for vengeance. It was the prayer of a broken man returning to the God who had called him before birth. Strength surged through Samson one final time. With all his might he pushed against the pillars. Stone cracked loudly. The temple trembled. Shouts of terror replaced laughter as the roof collapsed upon the rulers and crowds within. Samson died there beneath the ruins, but in his death he defeated more Philistines than he had during his life. Later his family carried his body home and buried him between Zorah and Eshtaol, near the tomb of Manoah his father. The people of Israel remembered him not only as a man of extraordinary strength, but as a sign of God's mysterious grace. Samson's story was never about perfection. He made reckless choices, trusted the wrong people, and often followed his desires instead of wisdom. Yet despite his failures, God continued working through him. Divine purpose was greater than human weakness. Grace followed Samson even into prison, even into blindness, even into death itself. Many generations later, parents still told their children about the man with uncut hair who defeated lions and armies. Shepherds repeated stories of the Jawbone battle beside evening fires. Elders spoke of the temple that collapsed beneath the hands of a blinded prisoner. But wise teachers also reminded listeners of deeper lessons hidden within Samson's life. True strength does not come from muscles alone. Samson's greatest victories happened when the Spirit of God empowered him. Whenever pride controlled him, destruction followed. Whenever he depended upon God, impossible things became possible. His life revealed both the danger of human weakness and the mercy of divine calling. Samson also showed that grace can restore those who fall. Though he wandered far from wisdom, God still listened when he cried out sincerely. Failure was not the end of his story. In his final moments he returned to the purpose appointed for him before birth. Heaven answered his prayer, and his life achieved its mission. The people of Israel eventually gained courage from Samson's example. They remembered that God had not forgotten them during years of oppression. Even in dark seasons, the Lord could raise unexpected deliverers. Samson's life became a testimony that divine power often shines brightest through broken people. Across centuries his name continued to inspire hope among those who felt weak or defeated. Farmers facing hardship remembered the man who tore apart a lion with bare hands. Prisoners remembered the blind servant who prayed for strength once more. Those burdened by failure remembered that grace still reached Samson at the lowest point of his life. The story of Samson endures because it speaks to every generation. Human beings long for strength, yet many discover that physical power alone cannot save the soul. People stumble, make painful mistakes, and sometimes feel trapped by consequences they cannot escape. Samson experienced all of this. Yet his story declares that God's purpose can survive human failure. From the moment the angel spoke to Manoah's wife until the final collapse of the Philistine temple, Samson's life moved beneath the hand of divine purpose. His strength was a gift. His victories were acts of grace. His restoration revealed mercy greater than shame. And his final sacrifice fulfilled the calling announced before he was born. In every age people have searched for heroes who seem larger than life. Kings build monuments to warriors. Nations celebrate champions who conquer enemies through courage and strength. Yet the story of Samson stands apart from ordinary legends because his greatness did not begin with human ambition. He was chosen by God before he ever understood his own destiny. His journey reminds readers that purpose is not something people create entirely for themselves. Sometimes purpose is a sacred calling planted deep within a person long before the world notices them. As a child, Samson likely heard his mother repeat the story of the angel many times. She probably spoke of the holy promise while combing his long hair in the evenings. Perhaps she reminded him gently that his life belonged to God. Those early lessons mattered. Even when Samson later wandered into pride and temptation, seeds planted in childhood often remain hidden until difficult seasons awaken them again. In the darkness of prison, memories of those sacred words may have returned to Samson with new meaning. The Philistines believed that chains could destroy him forever. They celebrated as though victory belonged entirely to them. Yet they misunderstood the source of Samson's strength. His power had never truly lived in his hair alone. The uncut hair represented covenant, obedience, and dedication to God. When Samson treated his calling carelessly, he became vulnerable. But when his heart turned back toward God in humility, grace met him again. That truth continues to speak powerfully today. Many people define themselves by success, talent, appearance, or reputation. When those things disappear, they feel empty and hopeless. Samson lost nearly everything that once made him feared and respected. He lost freedom, vision, honor, and physical independence. Still, his deepest purpose remained alive because God had not abandoned him. Even broken people can become instruments of divine purpose when they surrender sincerely. Another remarkable part of Samson's story is the courage hidden inside his final prayer. He could have remained bitter in prison. He could have blamed others endlessly for his downfall. Instead, he humbled himself before God. Real courage is not only found on battlefields. Sometimes courage appears when a wounded soul admits weakness and asks for mercy. Samson's final act required greater faith than the battles of his youth, because he could no longer rely upon sight or pride. He depended completely upon God. The collapse of the Philistine temple became more than an act of judgment. It marked the fulfillment of a promise spoken before Samson's birth. God had declared that Samson would begin delivering Israel from oppression. Though his life contained failure and pain, the divine promise still came to pass. This reveals a profound lesson about grace. Human mistakes may delay purpose, complicate purpose, or wound the heart deeply, but they cannot completely erase what God intends to accomplish through a surrendered life. Samson's legacy also points toward hope for future generations. His story teaches that strength without wisdom becomes dangerous, but strength guided by God can protect the weak and confront injustice. Young people who hear his story learn that gifts should never be separated from character. Adults who hear it are reminded that failure does not have to become the final chapter. Elderly listeners find comfort in knowing that purpose can still be fulfilled even after painful regret. The memory of Samson endured because his life revealed both the tragedy of human weakness and the triumph of divine grace. He was flawed, impulsive, and sometimes reckless, yet God still worked through him in extraordinary ways. His final victory was not simply the destruction of a temple. His greatest victory was returning to the God who had called him from the beginning. Long after Samson's death, travelers passing through the valleys of Israel still spoke his name with wonder. Some remembered the fearless warrior who defeated enemies with impossible strength. Others remembered the blind prisoner whose final prayer shook a nation. Parents taught their children that outward power means little without obedience, humility, and faith. Teachers reminded students that God often chooses imperfect people to accomplish extraordinary purposes. Samson's story continues to inspire because it reflects the struggles found in every human heart. People desire greatness, yet they battle weakness. They seek purpose, yet sometimes wander far from wisdom. They fail, regret choices, and wonder whether restoration is still possible. Samson answers those fears with a powerful testimony of grace. His life proves that God can still redeem broken moments and use them for a greater purpose. From his miraculous birth to his final breath beneath the collapsing temple, Samson's journey revealed the faithfulness of God. Strength made him famous, grace restored him, and purpose gave eternal meaning to his life. Even today, readers across the world continue returning to the ancient story of Samson because it carries timeless truth. Human strength fades, beauty disappears, and earthly victories pass away, but the grace of God remains powerful through every generation. Samson's life declares that no failure is beyond redemption when a person turns back to God with humility, faith, and complete surrender forever and always.